All right, seeing none, let's move to the Chief Financial Officer's report. Tim?
Yeah, you have the report, obviously in board book. The revenue for the month, $300,000. This is the time of the year when the revenue is fairly low every month until we get to March. Our total revenue was a little under $310,000. About a third of that came from property taxes, and then I highlighted in your packet a number of the other items. The food service program was about $84,000 in revenue for the food service program, which was one of the other major items. One of the questions was with regard to the collection of taxes, primarily in the education fund. We're at about 94%. I think last year this time we were at about 95%, but we ended the year well over 100%. So we'll continue to get taxes that were due in August. We'll continue to get those in the month of December and January and into next year, and I'm confident that we'll get to 100% of what we had budgeted. The operating expenditures for the month of November, $1.7 million. Again, fairly standard expenditures in terms of salaries and supplies and things of that nature. Our operating expenditures for the first 5 months, 33% of budget. That number is low because of the fact that we've transferred a minimal amount of money out of working cash, which is considered part of our operating expenditures. If you look at the other accounts, education, operations, transportation, and IMRF, we're running between 39 and 44%, and we're about 42% of the way through the year. So we're pretty much right where we need to be. Our operating fund balances at the end of November, $18,850,000. There were some questions with regard to some of the transfers in the activity accounts. Some of that is transfers of, we transferred some money out of the testing account into the new account that was created for the English books. That's because when the testing fees are paid by the parents, in many cases they're also paying for the English books, and so that money's all going into testing, and then we have to transfer that money out and put it into the English account. There are also some transfers that had to do with the credit card account, where we're transferring money out of the credit card accounts into the appropriate activity accounts. And there are a few other transfers. There was one out of vending, which we use to transfer money into other activity accounts where we need the money, that type of thing. And then there were also some questions about something on capital, and I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, so when I see the capital amount there, and I had asked Kevin, I assumed that maybe that was our life safety, but when I went through the budget, I didn't see it there. And it appears to me that within each of the budgets, education, building, grounds, the 10, the 20, the 40, that you have a line item for capital improvements in each of those areas. Is that correct? And that we had some capital expenses in several areas that accumulated to $20,000?
The majority of it, well, the capital expenditures, they're obviously going to have significant amounts coming out of the capital projects fund as we go through the year. We haven't started that yet, but that'll be the most significant numbers. We have had some capital expenditures in the operations fund that had to do with the movement of the sign that we had to move, as well as the work that we did on the entrance doors. We had that safety grant. That's part of capital where we made improvements to the entryways. I don't know if that answers your question.
This isn't in relationship to our work on the field or
No.
the bleachers or any of that?
No, we haven't started any of the capital. The only expenditures we have there are for some of the professional services that we've
See,
done.
that's what I mean. You say we haven't started any of the capital improvements there, but yet there was a line item for capital expenses, and so I was confused.
Okay.
Those are capital expenses and repairs related to the existing building, not
Yeah.
the project.
Yeah.
And the two you mentioned, we were getting reimbursed for those, right?
Yes.
The sign and the security.
I don't know if that's what she's asking. She's asking about the capital outlay budgets that you have under the individual departments, such as in vocational education. You have
What page?
page 43, I think this is what she's trying to, are you not trying to address the capital outlays?
That's where I think the 20,000 is coming from, and I was just confirming that that is correct, because when I first saw the capital, I wanted to make sure it was, I wanted to clarify that it wasn't any part of the capital improvement grant. When I went through the budget, it seemed like we have capital outlays in each of the budgets.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There's
Okay.
10,000
Yeah, so
under
these are
one.
different. So I
Yeah,
want to
we
make sure
have-
it's clear.
We have capital expenditures that are budgeted in a lot of the departments. The majority of it would be in the IT department. All of the computers that we buy and those types of things are allocated to capital. But there are other departments that have capital, requests for capital equipment in the education fund. We also have it, as I said, in the operations fund. We have requests for capital expenditures or budgets and that. But none of that has to do with the construction that we're going to be doing across the street.
So then if I remember correctly, when we sat down and did the budget, I think we allocated about 100,000 for the year for capital improvements?
6.6 million.
Well,
No, that would be the
that would-
bleachers and everything. So this is the capital outlay, so this is all part of that 6 point some
No,
million?
capital outlay is, I think what they're trying to explain to you is that if there's capital outlay throughout all the departments. So like, if vocational ed is buying a new stuff for the auto shop or that, anything over $1,000 has to be claimed as capital. So that would all be separate.
Right, and the computers were part of that.
Correct. We bought the Chromebooks for the rest of the staff, so that was a big purchase.
Right, and I thought we had a finite total number for the year for capital purchases.
Wait, Gary helped, I don't think you got answered right. I mean, I don't think we still right where Laura wants to get the question. There's the confusion, I always have it too, is there's a, Fund 60 is capital projects. But then we have line items in 10 and 20, at least, I don't know if we have them in 40. We could have them in 90 for the different funds where also it says capital outlay.
Right.
So what she's, I think, trying to understand is how much total capital are we spending? How do we know how much there is in the education fund, operations fund, or capital projects? That's, I think, where the confusion.
Right, because it seems to me when we have our discussions on the budget, we talk about the capital outlay, that's 60, but now we've got 20,000 that are capital line items in all these other budgets.
I'm sure we've exceeded 20,000. Because just alone in technology, we did 4 classroom sets of Chromebooks and the remaining teachers' Chromebooks, so I'm sure there was close to 20,000 just in technology. That's what some of those assumptions in the beginning of the budget will explain, some larger capital purchases.
So how do we
So
decide
we-
if a capital expenditure is going to be in capital project 60 or in education or operation and maintenance?
Capital Project 60 is only related to the work that's going to be done across the street.
And then the roofs here too, right?
And the roofs here, yes.
Okay.
But any of the other things, for example, last year, I think we had something where the special ed department needed some kind of a standard for one of the students that was over, well over $1,000. That's capital. They put that in their budget. So in the special education budget, there's a line item for capital. There's a line item for capital in the IT department for all of the computer items that he purchases that are over $1,000. So that it can be
I
in
don't
any
know if-
department.
Right, but I
can
don't
put-
think we've ever, we can check back on the assumptions and answer this in January or email
Yeah.
Mr. Ruska, but I'm not sure if we ever tallied just overall capital purchases throughout the budget.
I quickly added them up, it's somewhere around $85,000, but it's not like it's happenstance around the various departments. It looks like it's specifically identified by a department. The biggest one being it looks like the IT department, which I think we were all aware of when we did the budget, that we were gonna spend somewhere around
That was
$50,000 for Chromebooks,
Right.
right? I mean, there's other departments in here that are asking for $2,000, $1,000, and I'm sure they had requested something in there. Yeah, the IT department has budgeted 60 of the 85. And again, I just quickly added up, so I'm not, don't hold me to the 85. You can add them up, but I mean, 61,000 of it is sitting in the information which we all were aware of.
Right.
All right.
So Laura, did that help you? I don't know, are you still?
It does, and so when we have our conversation, we had a clear conversation about putting money for Chromebooks. We had a clear conversation about money across the street. I think we've asked the question, how do we account for items that wear out in the school? Desk, offices, how do we plan for that? This money seems to answer that question.
Correct.
I don't know that we said, well, we are allocating those kind of funds here, there, and everywhere else.
It would depend upon whether the item they're replacing is more or less than $1,000 though, right?
Right,
'Cause if
but
it's
apparently we
1,000,
are
it's
spending
capital.
capital in all our budget accounts. So,
But we've done that, Tim, every year, am I right?
Yes.
So it's not nothing new, so.
well, then it may be something we need to be a
Well,
little more aware of.
I wouldn't characterize it in all our educational areas. There's specific areas that haven't primarily, again, we go back to the IT, which is
Right?
61,000 of the 85 or so number. So if we didn't budget the Chromebooks, we'd be somewhere around 20, 25, which I think historically we've always had capital outlays for various for education departments. Sure.
Right, and we've asked a question, how do we plan for when things wear out or to replace them? I don't know that we've had that systematic question answered.
We did about a year or two ago. I think Tim Walsh had asked that question about our age and obsolescence with our computer labs and machines, and about how are we purchasing, trying to get all of our purchases for technology all through Mike, so that one department wasn't purchasing a laptop while another department was purchasing a lab. So we reported out to the board on that probably about a year or two ago. It's something that we could always add, we could always look to see if there's an assumption that highlights general capital. But I would think with a $22 million budget, we'd probably want to say any purchases over 10,000 or 20,000, you know. Try to come up with a numeric amount that we would, you know, put some notification in the assumptions of the budget.
I guess I would ask the question a little different than what Laura did. We did the building study. DLA did it for us to look at the whole infrastructure and say, okay, how the condition of the roof and everything, so you could start putting a plan together, but we don't actually do any kind of study of the other types of personal property in here, the desks and the chairs and all that, to see if, you know, when they need to be replaced. Is that kind of true?
Joel goes through, he has earmarked, they do classroom checks at the end of the year. We have teachers fill out a list if they feel they have kind of like a closing inventory, like the, you know, student desks that need to be replaced, teacher desk, and then we do a count. So we do a process for that.
Okay.
And I think that's part of the discussion we have with all of the different department heads when we do the budgeting every year. You know, it's part of the discussion with regard to purchase services. What are the purchase services that you need for next year? What are the capital items that you may need for next year? So it's part of that discussion.
Okay, any other questions for Tim?